The night she broke up with me, the world didn't shatter, it just went quiet. No trembling hands, no desperate pleas, no disbelief, only the dull thud of something that had already died long before her words reached me. She thought she was clever. Her voice trembled just enough to look sincere. Her eyes held just enough tears to seem convincing. It was all a performance, a test she thought I'd fail. She wanted me to fight for her, to grab her wrist, to prove I couldn't live without her. But the truth? I'd stopped grading her answers a long time ago. The essays of her love were full of red ink, late replies, empty promises, and affection that felt like it was only for show. Somewhere along the way, my heart had set down the pen and walked away. She expected a confession of undying love. Instead, she got silent. And when she stormed out, thinking she had the upper hand, she didn't see the final page I'd already written, the one where I didn't chase her, the one where her test became her undoing. Because the cruelest truth is this: you can't lose someone who's already gone. I arrived first and chose the table under the painting of a girl with an umbrella. Her face was tilted up toward a sky the painter had left empty, like the promise of rain that never arrives. The cafe smelled like cinnamon and wet wool. Outside, clouds gathered over the city like a hand closing into a fist. I sat with my back to the window. I didn't want the light on me. I wanted to watch it land on her. She came in wearing the cardigan I once bought her during finals week, when the air conditioning in the library blew like winter. Pale gray, soft as a secret. She hugged herself with it the way people hold a book they never finished. Her eyes scanned the room, landed on me, then glided away and back again as if this were some exam hall, and I was the only empty seat left. She smiled too carefully. She approached with rehearsed pauses between her steps. "Hey," she said. "Hey." Something in her hands trembled, maybe the cup she hadn't ordered yet, maybe it was me. She sat, placed her phone face down, and folded her fingers over it like a lid. The barista brought water. The glasses touched the table with a small, decisive click. I noticed ink on her thumb, the faint smear of red. Correction ink. My mind made the leap it always made these days without my permission. Notes, edits, control. "You look tired," she tried. "Are you sleeping?" "A little." We did not talk about the storm building outside, or the one building between us. She studied me the way a teacher studies a student, waiting for the paper to be turned over. The painting's empty sky behind her made a halo around all the things we hadn't said. She inhaled like she was about to jump into cold water. "I think we should take a break," she said, and measured the words as if they were fragile and expensive. "I need space." The cafe had a clock that ticked loud when the music paused. It did that now. Tick, tock. She what? Ched my face for the flinch. She had come for a reaction. I could feel it like static. "All right," I said. Her shoulders didn't fall in relief. They rose, then stalled. Surprise can look like pride for 1 second, before it breaks. "All right," she repeated, as if the word had too many letters. "I hear you." I wrapped both hands around my coffee like it might cool if I let go. The steam lifted between us, a thin curtain. It blurred the sharpness of her mouth, the way she pressed her lips when she wanted to be the one to end the scene. "This isn't... You're not going to ask why? Do you want me to?" "I don't know," she said too quickly, which is how you know a person does. A couple near the door laughed at something private and short. The sound crossed our table and left, uninvited. She reached for the menu, though we already knew everything on it by heart. Her fingers left little crescents of condensation from the water glass all over the paper, as if she was trying to erase the options. I'm not saying forever," she said, "just to see if it's healthy. If we still, I nodded. Right. You're being very calm." Maybe it was the weeks of unread messages I had stopped dissecting, like essays full of run-on sentences and ungraded promises. Maybe it was the trio of midnights she spent with the girls, except the girls didn't know about it, and a low laugh had traveled through her phone like a rumor. Maybe it was the way she had started speaking to me in multiple choice, as if love could be A, B, C, or none of the above. Whatever it was, I had put down my red pen long before this day. She took out a tiny notebook from her tote, the brown one with the elastic band, and set it near the edge of the table, half hidden by the salt shaker. The corner of a page peeked out. I didn't mean to read it, but the words were walking toward me anyway. Things he'll sue. A. I blinked. Under it, a list in red. Please don't. We can fix this. I'll change. Let me prove. Her thumb covered the rest. Her hand trembled and then stilled, like a needle at the end of a song. Did you write my lines for me? I asked, and kept my voice soft. If a thing is going to break, you don't drop it on purpose, you set it down. Color pricked the tops of her cheeks. She snapped the notebook closed with a small crack of rubber. I needed to prepare. I thought you'd... Beg? The word did not taste bitter. It was just a shape moving through a mouth. I thought you'd care. The sentence came out quieter than she intended. It landed between us, delicate and true. I looked at her, really looked, the cardigan sleeves pressed to her elbows, the neat part in her hair that I'd drawn with my fingers 100 mornings, the night we crammed for her midterms and she fell asleep on my lap, drooling on my notes, the ink blurring into constellations. I had loved her then, with the kind of love that feels like you are memorizing someone's body for an exam that will decide your life. But love cannot be tested without becoming performance. It cannot be forced to show its work on a blank sheet you plan to grade. I cared, I said. I cared until I felt like a lesson you were trying to pass. She laughed once. It broke in two. God, you make everything poetic. It was ordinary, I said. That's what hurt. Her eyes glistened and then cooled. She leaned in as if to touch my hand and then pulled back, her fingers hovering over the table's varnish, leaving nothing behind. The distance between us was the thickness of a napkin and the length of a year. Maybe if we take space, she tried again, we could. I reached into my pocket and took out the key to my apartment. Her key. The one I had given her with a kiss in the hallway that smelled of laundry soap and neighbor's curry and possibility. I set it on the edge of her saucer, beside a sugar packet. It made a small sound, like a note at the end of a song you didn't know had ended. Her face went through 3 emotions. So fast they tripped over one another. Confusion, then offense, then fear. The cardigan seemed to shrink on her shoulders. You're just giving up? I'm accepting the answer, I said. I kept my hands open on the table, palms up, as if to show I was hiding nothing. Rain finally began against the window, soft at first, then steadier. The girl in the painting seemed to catch it with her umbrella. The cafe blurred beyond our table, outlines smudged by weather and steam, like the world had decided to hold its breath. She lifted the key with 2 fingers. I didn't mean, I know. I stood before her, sentence could change shape. The chair legs scraped the floor like a throat clearing. I pulled out my wallet, tucked cash under the coffee cup, the corner of a receipt peeking out like a white flag. I thought about the letter folded in my jacket, 2 pages of everything I'd meant to say a month ago, written at 3 a.m. under bad light. I had sealed it and carried it for weeks like a talisman. I realized I no longer wanted to give it to her. Some words are not bridges, they are anchors. I pressed the letter deeper into my pocket and felt it stop there, finally heavy enough to teach me something. Wait, she said, standing, the chair tipping then thudding back. Wait, you can't just... Her phone lit up under her hand. The lock screen bloomed with a message I wasn't supposed to see, but the world tilted and delivered it anyway. Did he beg? The name above the bubble wasn't one I recognized, a woman's name, short and bright like a sparkler. The screen went dark. She flipped the phone so quickly it almost flew. The move was instinct, reflex, evidence. I have to go, I said. Who is she? She managed, and then realized what she'd asked. I mean, no, sorry, I just... It's raining, I said, because it was the kindest sentence available. She reached out and caught my sleeve without touching it. If I call you tonight, will you pick up? There was a time I would have waited by the phone for the sound of her breath. That time had a smell. Coffee gone cold, the metallic tang of late-night regret. That time had a texture, the indentation of my thumb on a send button. That time had a calendar, every day circled in hope. I don't know, I said, and meant it. I took my coat. I moved through the coffee smell and the cinnamon and the clock that couldn't stop telling the truth. The bell above the door chimed, and the rain's applause grew louder. For a second, the whole city sounded like a single hallway between classes, everyone moving to the next room where a different test waited. I pushed the door open. Cold touched my face with clean fingers. I stepped out and stood beneath the awning, where the rain misted without soaking. Through the glass, I watched her sink back into her chair, staring at the key as if it might explain itself. Then she glanced toward the window. Not at me. Beyond me. Her eyes shifted to the street, searching for someone else, someone I couldn't see, as if the grade she needed would come from another pair of eyes entirely. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Not her, a new message, no name I expected. The rain moved from mist to sheet, hiding my reflection and hers, turning all the people on the sidewalk into silhouettes carrying their own weather. I didn't check the message, not yet. The umbrella girl in the painting had her sky, I had mine. Behind me, the bell chimed again. Footsteps came fast, then slowed at my back. Her breath gathered like fog at the edge of the awning. Just one thing, she said, voice low, careful, as if she had reached a question that wasn't on her list. If I tell you the truth, will that change your answer? The rain answered first, hard and patient. I turned, but not all the way. Enough to see her eyes and the reflection of a second figure inside them, standing just beyond the glass, holding a phone like a gradebook. I let the question hang between us, unsolved. There was a time I would have waited by the phone for the sound of her breath. That time had a smell, coffee gone cold, the metallic tang of late-night regret. That time had a texture, the indentation of my thumb on a send button. That time had a calendar, every day circled in hope. I don't know, I said, and meant it. I took my coat. I moved through the coffee smell and the cinnamon and the clock that couldn't stop telling the truth. The bell above the door chimed, and the rain's applause grew louder. For a second, the whole city sounded like a single hallway between classes, everyone moving to the next room where a different test waited. I pushed the door open. Cold touched my face with clean fingers. I stepped out and stood beneath the awning, where the rain misted without soaking. Through the glass, I watched her sink back into her chair, staring at the key as if it might explain itself. Then she glanced toward the window. Not at me. Beyond me. Her eyes shifted to the street, searching for someone else, someone I couldn't see, as if the grade she needed would come from another pair of eyes entirely. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Not her. A new message. No name I expected. The rain moved from mist to sheet, hiding my reflection and hers, turning all the people on the sidewalk into silhouettes carrying their own weather. I didn't check the message, not yet. The umbrella girl in the painting had her sky, I had mine. Behind me, the bell chimed again. Footsteps came fast, then slowed at my back. Her breath gathered like fog at the edge of the awning. Just one thing, she said, voice low, careful, as if she had reached a question that wasn't on her list. If I tell you the truth, will that change your answer? The rain answered first, hard and patient. I turned, but not all the way. Enough to see her eyes and the reflection of a second figure inside them, standing just beyond the glass, holding a phone like a gradebook. I let the question hang between us, unsolved. The first time I saw her, it wasn't in some grand moment, no dramatic music, no slow motion, just the low hum of the campus library and the soft scrape of her chair as she sat across from me at the long oak table. It was the middle of winter semester. My desk was a fortress of textbooks, highlighters, and coffee cups, none of which made me look any less like someone drowning in deadlines. She had a single notebook, its corners neatly pressed, and a pen that clicked with surgical precision. Her hair caught the golden light streaming through the high windows, each strand bending to the sun like it owed her something. She glanced up once, just once, but it was enough for me to forget what page I was on. That day became the first of many. Soon, our study sessions became a rhythm. I'd slide my notes across the desk when she struggled with a formula. She'd push back a packet of gummy bears when she caught me yawning through a lecture. Sometimes our fingers brushed when exchanging papers, and though neither of us mentioned it, I'd feel the warmth long after the contact ended. During lectures, I sat 2 rows behind her. It wasn't planned, at least not at first, but it became a habit. From there, I could watch the way she twirled her pen when she was deep in thought, the way her head tilted when she was trying to understand something. And sometimes, when the professor's eyes weren't on us, she'd glance over her shoulder and meet my gaze. Just for a second. A stolen second. And we'd both return to our notes with a smile that belonged only to that moment. To me, she was my favorite subject, one that wasn't in the syllabus but consumed my focus anyway. Every smile from her was a perfect score, every laugh, a gold star in the margins of my days. It wasn't just studying, it was the walk to the vending machine when the library lights flickered close to midnight, it was her handwriting, looping and deliberate, which I recognized instantly even in someone else's notebook. It was the way she'd hum under her breath when she thought no one was listening, an unguarded melody that stayed in my head like an unfinished chorus. And in those moments, I believed we were learning the same language. I thought every shared glance, every quiet exchange, was part of a story we were writing together. One rainy afternoon stands out more than the rest. The library was almost empty, the kind of day where even the books seemed to curl into themselves. She came in, her hair damp, cheeks flushed from the cold, and without a word, slipped into the seat beside me. She opened her notebook, but instead of writing, she rested her head on her folded arms. I nudged my notes toward her, thinking she'd peek. Instead, she smiled into the crook of her elbow and whispered, "Just stay here with me for a while." So I did. And in the silence, I convinced myself I'd found something rare, something that didn't need to be tested or proven. But looking back now, I see the cracks that were there even then. I thought she was teaching me the way I was learning her, mapping my moods, understanding my silences, decoding my flaws with patience, but she wasn't studying the language we were speaking. She was memorizing lines from another play entirely, rehearsing for a stage I didn't know existed. Maybe the smiles I treasured were for the audience she'd already imagined, maybe the moments I thought were ours alone were just dress rehearsals for someone else's script. It's a bitter thing to realize you weren't part of the story, you were just the practice run. And yet, in that semester, I would have sworn she was the answer to every question. Now I know she was the trick question I never saw coming. It started small, so small I almost convinced myself it didn't matter. The first time was on a Tuesday night. I was half asleep, the glow of my desk lamp blurring into the pages of my textbook, when her phone lit up across the room. We were supposed to be studying together, but she'd fallen asleep curled up on my bed, her cardigan wrapped around her like a shield. The screen pulsed once, twice, and then again, 3 messages in a row. The name wasn't saved, just a number. It was past midnight. I remember leaning back in my chair, waiting for her to stir, for her to reach for it, for some innocent explanation to fall from her lips, but she didn't wake. And when I finally did ask the next morning, she smiled, a small, distracted curve of her mouth, and said it was just a group project thing. Her tone made it sound like I was overreacting, like the only wrong thing in the room was my suspicion. I wanted to believe her. I did believe her. That first time. But cracks have a way of spreading. A week later, she told me she was at the library. I knew her voice when she answered the phone, but the background noise wasn't the library's quiet hum. It was laughter, loud, unrestrained, mixed with clinking glasses. I could hear music too, faint but steady, the kind of beat you feel in your chest. When I asked about it later, she laughed and brushed it off. "We just went to grab a quick drink after studying, you know how it is." And I did know. I knew it wasn't the first time. I started noticing other small mistakes in her stories, slipped details, mismatched timelines. Like an essay written in a rush, hoping the teacher wouldn't notice the sentences that didn't fit. At first, I corrected them gently. "Didn't you say it was Friday? I thought you mentioned it was your cousin's place." Each time, she had a quick answer, a new version, a little patch to cover the hole. But after a while, I stopped pointing them out. Because you can only correct someone so many times before you realize they're not listening, they're not learning, they're just adjusting the performance to pass the moment, not the class. One night, I waited for her outside the campus gate. We had plans to get dinner, and she'd texted me she was just finishing up at the library. The air was sharp with winter, the kind that turns your breath into small ghosts in front of you. I stood under the yellow glow of the street lamp, watching the frost form on the edges of my scarf. When she finally appeared, it wasn't from the library. She came from the opposite direction, walking fast, her hair slightly mussed and her cheeks flushed in a way the cold alone couldn't explain. She spotted me and froze for a second before waving, her smile flickering like a light bulb that wasn't screwed in all the way. "You're early," she said. "No," I replied, "I'm on time." She hesitated, then looped her arm through mine, already steering us toward the street. "Well, let's go. I'm starving." I could have asked where she'd been. I could have pressed, demanded the truth, cornered her into either lying or confessing. But I didn't. Instead, I let her talk about the menu at the new ramen place, the way the broth was supposed to be, life-changing. I listened to her describe food as if she were reciting poetry, watched her eyes sparkle under the streetlights, and felt the weight of the question burning in my throat. I didn't ask it. Because somewhere between the library lie and the street lamp silence, I had learned something. If love is a test, it's not just about the right answers, it's about whether the other person wants to answer at all. And lately, every question I asked felt like an interruption to her real story, the one she was telling somewhere else, to someone else. That night, as she laughed over noodles, I realized I was starting to memorize her lies as much as her truths. I could predict them now, the pauses before the pivot, the slight raise of her eyebrow when she was about to change the subject. And it hit me in a way I wasn't ready for. I was no longer part of the lesson. I was just the chalkboard she scribbled on until she found a cleaner slate. When we parted ways, she hugged me tight, the scent of her perfume lingering on my coat. It should have felt like warmth. It felt like a cover. I walked home alone, the streets wet from a light rain, my shoes catching the reflections of street lamps. And in the quiet, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe the first wrong answer had been mine, believing she was here to teach me, when all along she'd been studying for someone else's test. The next time her phone lit up past midnight, I didn't even look. It happened so gradually that I almost didn't notice the shift, until one day, the distance between us was too wide to measure. We had always been a team. That was the deal. Two people facing the same exam life kept handing out, scribbling our answers in the margins for each other to see. If she struggled, I'd stay up with her, making flashcards until my voice went hoarse. If I stumbled, she'd brew coffee strong enough to keep my eyes open, just so I could keep going. We were partners in every sense of the word, until we weren't. The first sign came in the form of a tagged photo I wasn't in. She was in a cafe I didn't recognize, sitting next to a guy I'd never met. The caption read, "Late night study grind with the dream team," followed by emojis I didn't have the patience to decode. I stared at it longer than I should have. Not because I thought something was happening, at least not then, but because I'd never been replaced in our rituals befa. Or, we had a rhythm, and now she was tapping her pencil to a different beat. At first, I told myself it was just a group project. You can't choose your partners, right? But then the photos started multiplying, her in the library with them, her holding up bubble teacups with matching smiles, her head tilted just slightly toward him in a way I had once thought was mine. When I confronted her, I tried to keep my voice casual. "So, new project partner?" She laughed, too light, too airy. "Oh, you mean Sam? Yeah, it's for econ. He's hilarious, makes the boring parts bearable." I smiled back, but it felt like drawing a smile on paper, convincing at first glance, empty when you touch it. It wasn't just the photos, it was the sound of her laughter in them. Different, lighter, as if she'd found some new inside joke I wasn't invited to learn. And every time she looked at her phone, that same brightness would flicker across her face, like she was somewhere else entirely, somewhere I didn't have the map to. I started scrolling through her feed late at night, not because I wanted to catch her in anything, but because I wanted to see where she'd been, what she'd been doing. It felt like flipping through a syllabus that no longer had my name on it, assignments I hadn't been given, lectures I hadn't attended, notes I'd never get to borrow. In one photo, she was wearing the sweater I bought her last winter. She'd paired it with a scarf I'd never seen before, one that matched his. My eyes caught on that small detail like a hook. I wondered if it was just coincidence, or if that was the point. I told myself not to read into it. But the truth, every image felt like a sentence in a story where I was no longer the narrator. I was just a footnote. The real breaking point came during a Friday evening we had planned for weeks, dinner at our favorite ramen place, then a walk through the park. She texted me an hour before, "Can we rain check? Group project is running late." I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her that if we kept rescheduling, eventually there'd be nothing left to reschedule, but I didn't. I told her it was fine. Later that night, while aimlessly scrolling, I saw her tagged in a post from that same cafe. She was leaning over the table, laughing at something on his phone. No textbooks in sight, just 2 cups of coffee, a slice of cheesecake, and the kind of easy comfort that used to belong to us. The caption was simple: "Study break with the best company." I didn't like the photo, I didn't comment, I just stared at it until the screen went dark, my own reflection staring back at me. That weekend, I didn't hear from her until Sunday night. She called, her voice warm and casual, as if nothing had shifted. She told me about her week, about the progress on their project, about how we had finally cracked the hardest part. I listened, I even laughed when she wanted me to. But each "we" she used felt like a replacement, like she had found someone else to share the pen with. I could have told her how it felt, how it hurt, how I kept seeing my absence in the spaces between her sentences, but I didn't, because deep down, I already knew the truth. We were supposed to face life's exams together, but somewhere along the way, she had found a new partner, and I was just the ghost of an old study guide she no longer needed. The last thing she said that night was, "You're still my favorite person, you know that?" I almost believed her, almost, but as I hung up, my phone buzzed with a new notification, another photo, another caption, another reminder that my name wasn't on the paper anymore, and for the first time, I wondered if maybe it had been erased on purpose. It was a Tuesday night, one of those quiet ones when the world outside feels muffled, like it's been wrapped in cotton. We were in my apartment, the warm yellow lamp casting a soft halo over the coffee table. She was curled into the corner of the couch, scrolling on her phone with her knees tucked up, a blanket draped loosely around her shoulders. I was at my desk, pretending to read, eyes tracing the same line of text over and over, without processing a single word. Her phone buzzed once, then again, rapid, like a door being knocked on in a hurry. I didn't look up at first, but then I heard it. His name. Spoken aloud by her phone in that cheerful, mechanical tone she'd set for notifications. Once, twice, 3 times. It was louder than the sound of her voice had been all night. I glanced over, and she didn't flinch. Didn't turn the screen away, didn't silence it. She just kept typing, thumbs moving fast, a small smile forming at the corner of her lips. Not the kind of smile you give when you're replying to a classmate, not the kind you give when you're making plans with your best friend. It was the soft, private smile of someone speaking in a language only 2 people understand. I could have asked, I could have said, "Who's that?" or "Why is he texting you at midnight?" But I didn't. Because in that moment, something inside me just let go. I realized I had been keeping score in a game she didn't even know she was playing. Every time I stayed up late to help her study. Every time I forgave a half-truth. Every time I tried to read between the lines of her excuses. I thought I was giving her the chance to pass. I thought we were both sitting for the same exam. But the truth was, she wasn't even in the classroom anymore. I sat there, pen in hand, staring at the open notebook on my desk. The page was blank, save for a single half-written sentence from earlier that day, something about a deadline I was supposed to meet. My fingers loosened, and the pen rolled slowly across the desk, falling to the floor with a soft clink. I didn't pick it up. I didn't move when she laughed under her breath at something on the screen. I didn't lean forward to try and catch a glimpse of the messages. I didn't even ask her if she was staying the night or heading home. I just stopped. Stopped checking her stories to see where she'd been. Stopped hoping she'd notice when I pulled away. Stopped filling the silence between us with questions designed to make her remember we were on the same side. We were 2 people in the same room, separated by a distance that couldn't be measured in feet. Eventually, she looked up. "You're quiet tonight," she said. I forced a smile, the kind that sits on the mouth but never reaches the eyes. "Just tired." She nodded and went back to her phone, as if that explained everything. And maybe it did. The night stretched on in that strange, heavy way time does when you're both waiting for something that isn't going to happen. The heater hummed softly in the corner, the clock ticked in slow, steady beats, and her phone kept lighting up, over and over, like a beacon I wasn't meant to follow. At some point, she dozed off, still holding her phone loosely in one hand. I stared at her profile, the curve of her cheek, the steady rise and fall of her breathing, and felt nothing. Not anger, not jealousy, just a hollow, cooling quiet where love had been. I picked up the blanket that had slipped from her shoulders and covered her, not because I wanted to take care of her, but because it was muscle memory, something my body did out of habit, even when the heart no longer sent the signal. The rain started just after midnight, soft at first, then harder, the sound filling the spaces between us. I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark, watching the streetlight smear across the wet glass. I knew then that this was the moment. Not the texts, not the name I recognized, but wouldn't speak aloud, not even the smile she thought I didn't see. This was the moment I put the pen down, the moment I stopped grading her answers, the moment I accepted the test was over, and for the first time in months, I didn't care if she passed or failed. I chose the same table as always, the one beneath the painting of the girl with the umbrella turned toward a blank, waiting sky. The canvas made its own weather. It said, prepare. It said, don't expect sunlight to explain itself. The cafe held the cinnamon wool smell of damp coats and steamed milk. The windows wore a skin of rain, the glass beading and sliding like it was trying to remember how to be river again. She arrived with careful steps and a costume I recognized, the pale cardigan, the clean hair part, the lipstick shade I used to tease her about because it left ghost prints on coffee cups. Today, the color had been chosen for clarity. It said, look at me when I say the line. Hey, she said, voice gentle, not intimate, like a flight attendant announcing turbulence she's practiced 100 times. Hey, I said, and felt the room shift to its mark. She didn't sit immediately. She stood opposite me, hands braced on the chair back as if preparing to take attendance. Then she eased down, phone face up beside the sugar, the screen's brightness turned high like a spotlight. Her eyes were soft with worry, not fear of loss, fear of failing the scene. I've been thinking, she began. The barista called a name that wasn't ours. A spoon tapped the side of a mug, 3 slow chimes. I wrapped my fingers around my cup and waited for the script. I think. She stopped. Let the pause breathe. Thespians know silence is a tool. I think we need to take a break. Somewhere in the cafe, the old wall clock slipped into a louder tick, as if to underline the sentence. Around us, forks scraped plates, chairs shuffled, a door hissed open and closed, letting in a square of cold that dissolved across the floor. Her eyes searched my face like a teacher waiting for the correct answer, eyes wide, pupils eager, a little shine added for effect. I could have played my part, the one she wanted, shock. A hand reaching across the table. A cracked voice confessing the desperation she could film in her mind and replay for herself later. I could have asked why or who or when. I could have offered forgiveness like extra credit. Instead, I lifted my cup and sipped. The coffee moved bitter and clean across my tongue. It was warmer than I expected. I set it down without clatter. All right, I said. For a heartbeat, her expression lost choreography. Panic flickered, then flattened. You can always hear it, the split second when a script slips. She rallied fast, gathering the lines scattered at our feet. I don't mean forever, she said, leaning into the next cue. Just space, to see if this is healthy. I want us to want each other without pressure. I nodded, as if she had offered a new concept to study. Space, I repeated, like a student writing vocabulary in a margin. She tilted her head, surprised by the absence of a storm. You're really okay? I'm listening, I said. In another version of us, I would have touched her wrist. In another version, she would have leaned across and pressed her forehead to my palm, the way she did once when the world had been too loud and we used our bodies to make it quiet. But that version had gone missing. We had been rehearsing for weeks without telling the other. She'd practiced tears that could be called back on cue. I'd practiced silence. We both knew our lines. She reached into her tote and placed a small notebook by the salt. Brown paper cover, elastic band. I'd seen it before. The corner of a page nudged out like a shy tooth. Her thumb stayed on it, ready, guarding. I didn't look down. I didn't have to. I knew what lived there. Prompts, comebacks, fishing lines to pull me into deeper water where she could save me publicly. We've been off lately, she said. I feel like you're not present. I need to know if I'll beg? My tone was question soft, not knife sharp. Color rose along her cheekbones, the kind that appears when someone says the name of a thing you kept in the dark. The rain thickened. The umbrella girl's painted sky went glossy. It's not about ego, she said too quickly, which is exactly how you know it is. It's about knowing where we stand. I shifted my chair an inch. The legs made a scrawl on the floor, a graphite line under the scene, distance, intimacy measured in furniture. We stand, I said, on what's true. She exhaled, misting the air between us. Then say something, anything. Tell me you still love me. Tell me you're scared. Tell me you'll try. I need. She cut herself off, anger knitting through her careful diction. I need something. I thought of the nights I drafted letters in the blue hour, words that felt like ropes thrown across a widening gap. I thought of the one folded in my jacket now, 2 pages of apology and hope and small household vows. The weight of it against my ribs was a paper heart, crinkled from being held too often. I kept my hand away from that pocket. Some words are dangerous when spoken too late, they turn to smoke and sting the eyes. What if I told you, I said, that I already gave everything I know how to give? Her mouth trembled, not with grief but with frustration. The performance hung in the air with nowhere to land. She glanced at the window, the place where reflections tell you who's watching. There was no audience, except the rain, recording without compassion. Her phone buzzed, the screen lit, a message unfurled itself like a banner. She flicked it dark before the name could settle in my mind. I didn't reach, I didn't scan, I let it pass through me like weather. In my chest, a strange peace opened, a field after harvest. Is there someone else? She asked, switching scripts mid-scene. Be honest. No, I said. There's just less of me. She laughed once, sharp. So, this is my fault. We wrote this together, I said. But we practiced it separately. The clock ticked, a sugar packet tore open at a nearby table, tiny crystals like bright sand on a ship's deck. She pressed her palms flat and leaned forward, dropping the gentle voice the way actors drop a mask backstage. Please, she said, don't make me the villain. I didn't answer, because I didn't believe in villains, not anymore. Only people who build rooms inside their hearts and forget to leave the door open. I lifted my cup again. Steam met my face the way a curtain meets a cheek before the bow. Say you'll fight for this, she whispered, fierce now, as if volume might conjure faith. Say you'll fix it with my. I looked past her to the painting. The umbrella caught light like a held breath. The girl's face, half turned, seemed to watch rain that had not yet fallen, waiting, expecting. I won't fight your test, I said. There's no grade I want from it. Silence fell on us like snowfall, clean, total, unremarkable to anyone not standing inside it. I felt it fill the space where her next line should go. The silence was my final grade, handed back without comment. Not an A, not an F, not even incomplete, just the end of enrollment. She reached for a last tactic, memory. Remember the night before my midterms? She said, voice threading with velvet. When you made flashcards and I cried and you said I was more than my score? That boy loved me. That boy, I said, and tried to smile, hadn't learned that love fails when it becomes grading. She sat back, stunned not by cruelty but by the absence of it. It is disarming to realize the person you expected to wound you has put down every weapon and walked away inside himself. Outside, someone opened the door. Rain-eyed light spilled across the tile, then folded back. The bell chimed. She swallowed hard and finally picked up the notebook, thumb at the elastic. For an instant, she looked 12, child small, caught cheating on an exam she thought would decide her life. I just needed to know, she said, and her honesty was unadorned and devastating. If you'd still choose me, if I still mattered the most. You mattered, I said. You do, but I don't worship. Her eyes flashed. There it was, the bare wire of ego, stung and visible. She started to speak, then stopped. The phone, obedient and bright, lit again. I didn't see the name, I didn't need to. The glow painted her knuckles. Every digit of light underlined what we already knew. This was not about us, it was about applause. I slipped my hand into my coat, not for the letter, but for the key on my ring. The metal kissed my palm with winter. I twisted it free and placed it on the saucer beside her spoon. A soft note, a period made of brass. Her breath caught. The performance had offered many endings, it had not rehearsed this one. That's not. She broke off, voice hushed by the shape of the moment. I wasn't ending us. No, I said. You were testing me. And you're failing on purpose. I'm graduating, I said quietly. The clock ticked, The coffee cooled, the umbrella held its small defiance against an unpainted storm. She stared at the key as if it could change into something merciful. The phone buzzed, softer this time, as if embarrassed. I stood. The chair's scrape sounded like a pencil drawing a line beneath a problem solved. "Can we talk later?" she asked, rising too, hope spiking like fever. "When you've thought?" I met her eyes and saw the place where love had once looked back, occupied now by a mirror that only reflected her. I wanted to be kind. I also wanted to be accurate. "I have been thinking," I said, and tipped what remained of my coffee toward the light, watching the surface shiver into stillness. "For a long time." I stepped away from the table. The bell chimed as I reached the door. Cold licked the edges of my sleeves. Behind me, the notebook's elastic snapped softly, a small sting of sound. "Wait," she called, not loud, not dramatic, but human. I turned a fraction, enough to hold her with the corner of my sight. "If I tell you something true," she said, pulse beating in her throat like a trapped moth, "will you change your answer?" The rain answered first, steady and patient. I didn't. Between us, the key gleamed like a tiny moon on white porcelain, and her phone lit one more time, its pale square reflecting in the window, casting my silhouette in a brighter outline I didn't recognize. The first morning after her breakup, I woke to silence. Not the heavy, stale kind that fills a room after an argument. This was lighter. Like the air had been cleared of static. The blinds were half open, letting in the pale gray of an early winter sky. I didn't rush to check my phone. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the pull of someone else's mood dictating the start of my day. Instead, I pulled on my running shoes. The streets were damp from a night of rain, the asphalt shining like it had been polished. My breath came in clouds as I jogged past shop windows still sleeping behind their shutters. Every inhale felt like reclaiming space I hadn't realized I'd given away, one lungful at a time. I wasn't running from her, I wasn't running toward anything either, I was simply moving for myself. In the afternoons, I began haunting the old bookstore by the station again, the one with uneven shelves and that faint smell of dust and paper dreams. I'd lost hours there before I met her, but somewhere along the way, my visits had dwindled to nothing. Now, I let my fingers trail along the spines, pulling down whatever called to me. A battered copy of a poetry collection. A history book I'd always meant to read, stories that didn't demand my performance, only my attention. Little by little, I stitched my life back together, not the one I'd had before her, but something new. I reconnected with people I'd let fade into the background. Old classmates who didn't need me to prove my loyalty, friends who asked real questions and wanted real answers, not the rehearsed kind. Our conversations were clumsy at first, like muscles remembering how to move, but they were honest, and honesty, I'd learned, was a rare currency. She was still there though, not in my life, but in the periphery. I'd see her across the quad sometimes, her laughter just a little too loud, her gestures just a little too wide, as if the world needed to know she was fine. Her friends would glance at me when they thought I wasn't looking, whispers passing like folded notes in a classroom. And sometimes, I'd catch her eyes lingering on me, a second too long, a moment she didn't mean to give away. The first time, it was while I was helping someone from my lit class carry a stack of books into the library. The girl, Amara, had smiled at me in that effortless way people do when they have no agenda. She'd joked about how heavy her backpack was, and I'd laughed, really laughed. When I glanced up, there she was, my ex, standing just beyond the columns, pretending to read a notice board. Her eyes tracked me the way a teacher watches a student about to give an unexpected answer. I didn't wave, I didn't nod, I simply kept walking. I knew then that her test had backfired in the worst possible way. She'd set it expecting a desperate chase, and instead, she'd been left holding the paper while I quietly walked out of the classroom. One evening, I sat in the park with a thermos of coffee, the pages of a book fluttering in the wind. The sunset was burning itself out behind the buildings, painting the clouds in fading gold. Across the path, two kids were trying to teach each other how to skip stones in the pond. They kept failing, but every splash made them laugh harder. I realized how much I missed moments like that, where failing didn't matter because the joy was in the trying. That's what my life felt like now. Imperfect, unpolished, but mine. The first time I saw her watching me from a distance, I thought I imagined it. The second time, I knew. She was leaning against a lamppost, scrolling her phone, but every few seconds her gaze would lift, land on me, and slip away before I could catch it head on. I wondered what she saw now. Did she see the person who used to sit across from her in cafes, hanging on her every word, desperate to be given a passing grade? Or did she see someone she no longer recognized, a version of me she hadn't bothered to learn before it was too late? One night, long after the campus lights had gone out, I walked home through the quiet streets. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost didn't check it, but the screen lit up, and there it was. I think I made a mistake. 5 words. No punctuation, no context, just her voice, echoing in text form, trying to find its way back into a place it no longer belonged. I stood there under the dim glow of a street lamp, the cold pressing against my cheeks. My thumb hovered over the screen. The old version of me would have replied instantly, pouring out reassurances, ready to sit another exam. But that part of me had graduated. So I slid the phone back into my pocket, face down, letting the message sink into the silence. The night was still, the air smelled faintly of rain. Somewhere in the distance, a train rumbled past, carrying people toward destinations I didn't need to follow. I kept walking, the streetlights stretched ahead, each one a pool of light I could step into, then out of again. And for the first time, I realized, I wasn't the one being tested anymore. I was the one writing the questions. And she no longer had the answers. It came on a Sunday morning in late spring. The light was soft through my curtains, the kind that makes dust motes float like slow snow. I'd just poured my first cup of coffee, the steam curling in front of my face, when my phone lit up on the table. Her name. I hadn't seen it in months. The preview was short, almost shy. I think I made a mistake. 5 words. No hello, no explanation. Just a sentence dropped like a pebble into a pond, hoping the ripples might reach me. For a moment, I just stared at it, the way you might stare at an old photo you'd forgotten existed. My chest didn't tighten the way it once would have. There was no sudden rush of adrenaline, no impulse to type back before she could think I'd moved on. Instead, the quiet inside me deepened, steady and sure. I took a sip of coffee, the bitterness felt clean. Months ago, I would have written back in seconds. I'd have dissected every word, convinced myself that mistake meant she'd seen my worth again. I would have been ready to meet her halfway, to reopen the classroom we'd abandoned, to sit down and start another test I was destined to fail. But the thing about grades is, once the semester ends, nothing changes. You can't rewrite the paper, you can't ask for extra credit, you can't go back and suddenly care enough to learn. I set the cup down and picked up my phone, my thumb hovered over her name. I thought about the winter evenings we'd spent together, her curled in my apartment with her phone lighting her face while mine stayed dark in my hand. I thought about the silence I'd given her that day in the cafe, the silence she didn't know how to grade. I thought about the weeks after, the runs through rain-washed streets, the books I'd read without her voice in my ear, the people who spoke in truths instead of riddles. Her message wasn't about me, it was about her need to undo the ending, to prove she could still pass if she wanted to. But I wasn't the examiner anymore. I opened the message fully, letting the words fill my screen. I think I made a mistake. The timestamp blinked beneath it, reminding me it had been sent less than 5 minutes ago, as if that urgency could pull me back. It didn't. I didn't type a single letter in reply. Instead, I tapped the small icon in the corner, dragging the message into my archive. It slid away like an old exam pushed to the bottom of a desk drawer, ungraded, forgotten, no longer worth the ink. The air felt lighter after. Outside, the world was moving on, a breeze carried the sound of someone laughing down the street. A neighbor's wind chimes played an aimless tune. The day was already warm enough that I knew the park would be full by noon, the trees tossing their green into the sunlight like confetti. I slipped my phone into my pocket and finished my coffee slowly, savoring it the way I used to savor her attention. The difference was, this cup didn't ask me to prove myself. Later, I'd walk into town, maybe stop by the bookstore or meet a friend for lunch. Maybe I'd sit in the park with my notebook and write a letter I'd never send, just to see the words take shape. But I wouldn't reply, not today, not ever. Because some doors aren't locked, they're simply gone, replaced by walls you've learned not to lean against. And as the sunlight reached across my table, touching the place where my phone had been, I realized she wasn't waiting for my answer. She was waiting for the boy who used to worship her. And he didn't live here anymore. Eclipsed. It happened quietly, like most beginnings do. No trumpet, no lightning strike. Just a Tuesday afternoon in the campus garden, the sun caught between clouds, painting the grass in shifting gold. She was sitting alone on a stone bench, a book open in her lap, her hair falling forward like a curtain she didn't care to move. I noticed her because she wasn't looking at her phone. She wasn't rehearsing anything for the world to see, just reading, eyes moving at an unhurried pace, as if the story had chosen her, not the other way around. I sat on the other end of the bench, not too close, not too far. Enough space for silence to feel safe. She glanced up and smiled, not the kind that tests you, not the kind that says prove you deserve this smile, just a simple, open gesture, as if we'd known each other long enough to skip the introductions. Good book? I asked. She closed it halfway, thumb holding her place. It's an old favorite, she said. I already know the ending, but I like the way it gets there. I didn't realize it then, but that was the moment, the first answer she gave. Me that didn't require follow-up questions, justification, or decoding. Just truth, offered without hesitation. We began to meet there often, sometimes by coincidence, sometimes by arrangement. She'd bring tea in a thermos, I'd bring the kind of cookies that crumble if you hold them too long. We'd talk, or we wouldn't. The silences with her weren't heavy, they were space, air between notes, pauses that made the words matter more. She never made me explain myself twice. If I told her I liked something, she believed me. If I said I didn't, she didn't try to change my mind. With her, there were no pop quizzes hidden in the conversation, no traps disguised as casual questions. She didn't sit across from me like a teacher waiting to grade my answers. She sat beside me like someone willing to turn the page at the same pace, even if it meant waiting while I reread a line I liked. One rainy afternoon, we ended up in the old library, my favorite place in the city. The windows fogged over as we read at the same table, the sound of the storm filling the space between us. She reached for my pen without asking and doodled something in the margin of my notebook, 2 small houses under the same umbrella. She slid it back to me without explanation. I didn't ask what it meant, I didn't need to. The past crept up sometimes, uninvited. My ex's name still appeared in old group photos, her laugh still echoed faintly in the halls where we used to walk. But with each day, those echoes grew softer, like background noise fading as the melody took over. The last time I saw her, she passed me in the student cafe. She smiled in that polite, tight way you give strangers you might have known once. I returned it just the same. There was no anger, no longing, just closure. Because I'd realized something. The best revenge had never been about proving myself to her, never about passing the test she set without my consent. The real victory was in walking out of the classroom entirely, into a place where there were no grades, only conversations, shared books, and umbrella sketches in the corner of a page. One evening, sitting on the garden bench with the new girl, her shoulder warm against mine, the sun bleeding out into a soft blue sky, I closed my eyes. I thought about all the answers I'd once rehearsed for someone who never intended to believe them, and then I thought about now, about being believed for the first time, without proof, without fear of failing. It felt like graduation. No stage, no cap and gown, just the quiet ceremony of closing one book and opening another, this time with my name on the cover. And as the street lamps blinked on one by one, I realized, I hadn't just left her test behind, I'd written my own. One I didn't have to pass alone.